All right, here we go. Get ready to have a good time. This is exciting, isn't it?
All right, we're on. Hello, testing.
Welcome aboard the Dreamliner.
It's the only way to fly.
We have clearance, Clarence.
Roger. What's our vector, Victor?
Podcaster Gary Meyer.
International podcaster?
Yeah, international. Do I get special treatment?
Eagle 3842, Chicago approach, shut up.
Gary.
Here's a young speaker who is really in demand.
Don't let that go to your head, Gary.
But wait, there's more. See, I'm the guy.
He is Gary Meyer.
Welcome aboard the Gare Force. It's the July 16th, 2021 edition of the Gary Meyer Show Cocktail Hour Live.
Cocktails, woo, drinks.
We went wheels up at 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 Central, 4 Mountain, 3 Pacific, 2 in Alaska, and noon in Hawaii. Usually I run something pre-recorded at this point, but because I was literally wearing my Mouse Planet hat very early this morning at an invited media event at the Epcot International Food and Wine Festival, which kicked off yesterday and runs until November 20th, I'm going to switch to myself now live for a quick update. Well, the mic is live anyway, but I'm here in my studio, and of course the Food and Wine Festival is all about food, wine, other adult beverages, and yes, I even had some at 8 in the morning this morning. It was quite the thing. Well, in a moment, we'll see more, but now back to me. Of course, no matter where you are, it's time for a digital mimosa. That's not me. Thanks for streaming with us. The Gare Force offers up new content 5 days a week. For the best live show experience, subscribe to the Gare Force Live YouTube channel. Comments are welcome on all our streaming channels during our live shows. And you can also text us at 773-888-2157. Regular charges may apply. Now fasten your seatbelts. It's time to go wheels up on the Gare Force Live.
Hey now. Thank you, Alan. I'm sorry you had to get up so early to eat what looked like a donut with M&Ms on it.
It had Twix and M&Ms and it was bigger than a couple of fists. It was something else.
Yeah, baby. Whenever anything's bigger than a couple of fists, you're in for a good day. In fact, I see on the chat line here that Dangerous Dale said, I feel like you're going to have a good show. Stephen from Payless Park, Illinois said, like Steve Harvey, are you going to have a good show? Is it going to be a good one for you today? I think it is. I feel really good. Of course, that might be the Manhattan talking. Let's see what Kellyanne had to say. She's usually the first in, and today was no exception. Gary, I keep sending you cute videos of me playing with my schnauzer. When will you start featuring them on Fridays? You promised. Well, Kellyanne, I haven't seen those videos. I would remember those, and I would gladly show them if you sent them, but I haven't seen them. Maybe they went somewhere else. Somebody's enjoying your schnauzer, but thank you for the thought. And we've heard now from Doug and Catherine and Lynn and Martin from British Columbia, Johnny from Michigan, Mary Jo. They've all checked in so far. Welcome to the cocktail show. It's going to be, I think, really interesting today. And Leslie, I would imagine that you have put down a little bass and are ready to go.
I started when we started the pre-show. Just had to give it a taste, and also had to open up the bottle so that I could put my cheesy wine stopper in there. So thank you to Ryan from Wisconsin for that.
Ryan from Wisconsin has delivered the goods once again. I'll tell you what, the people, we have to kick the tires and light the fires. Otherwise, we don't have Wheels Up. And my guest will tell us about Wheels Up in just a few minutes. And by the way, I am apologizing right now. The spelling of his name tells me it should be Dezo, but the actual pronunciation, he's Hungarian, is Dezső. Dezső Molnár. And Dezső, I apologize. You heard that in the opening. That's the way we Americans talk. That's how we see a name spelled D-E-S-Z-O. That's Dezo over by there. But it's Dezső. Okay.
We took that phonics class a couple of years back, and so we just say it the way it's spelled. That's what we do.
I'm enjoying, as I mentioned, my Manhattan.
Cool.
Got my Bugs Bunny Band-Aid on. And I want to say, go ahead.
Oh, it's your show. You want to say, you say.
No, I interrupted you.
Well, I was just going to say, we started off with a mention of Steve Harvey. And I was just watching me some Family Feud. And the question was, what makes a good show host? And I think a couple of the answers included a buttery voice, sharp dressing, and great personality. And I went, that's Gary.
That's Leslie. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay. I want to mention next Friday, my guest will be Barry Butler, and we'll be talking about his book. There's a glare on that. His book about these lovely photos. Chicago, a city above all. That's a week from today. And then in 2 weeks, Andy Richter, the longtime sidekick to Conan O'Brien, will be on the program to talk about that run and what he's going to be doing now and his career in general. Okay? That's coming up. The people of Wisconsin, Ryan will be reporting in a little bit about Wisconsin, and he's been very generous to you and me with all these different gifts. In fact, this glass that I'm drinking my Manhattan out of you can't see it. It's etched in there. It's a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood glass, and he knows how much I like that movie, and he sent me that glass. Now, other people in Wisconsin are being generous. Look what I got from Tracy from Racine.
And what did we find out this week on the podcast? That's no small investment. Those things are
How about that? I love getting packages.
Awesome.
And when you open it and it's this, it's like, yes, look at that. I'm so excited. Thank you, Tracy. And the people
so
of Wisconsin,
you can make a tray and then put it in your Once Upon a Time in Hollywood glass?
Yes. The Wisconsin people, they're givers. And I love that. So, Tracy, thank you. And Tracy also sent me that raspberry Kringle from that bakery in Racine. That was, oh my God, delicious.
Awesome.
Yeah. So it's all good. Well, Entenmann's is good too. I was hoping that Entenmann's raspberry coffee cake would be the cure for COVID. One of those weird things where they go, oh, we've done research and it's Entenmann's raspberry coffee cake that cures COVID. Woo! Ooh-ah. That's what I was hoping. Did not materialize. So there is that damn spore. And I guess that spore has completely blown up around the world again, right?
Do we know if that's the Delta variant or is that the Epsilon variant? There's going to be a Gamma and
the googly-eyed variant. Could be that one. Hey, in the opening, we heard what season we're in and tornado, hurricane, and all those things. I also want to mention we're in the kids and animals locked in hot cars and bouncy castles blowing away season.
Oh, yeah.
That's part of this season too, yeah. Okay.
That's coming.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to bring on Dejer right now because this guy is pretty fascinating. And
he has nothing to say.
Yeah, you're not going to hang on every word that he's going to tell you because it's all kind of, oh, yeah. All right.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Yeah. Dejer Molnar, there he is. Hey, Dejer.
Hello, Gary.
Now, you told us before the show that you don't drink.
I don't drink alcohol. I haven't, and I don't own a television set. But if I sent you pictures of my schnauzer, would you show that on your show?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would. You rascal, you.
What we have here today is kombucha with fresh lime and blueberries. So I'm going to throw it in the blender after we're done. And you probably throw me in the blender. I feel like I'm on an episode of Fargo right now.
That's one of the best compliments you could give me. Yeah. We're from the sewer. Yeah, we're from the sewer. Yeah. Hey, Dejer, now we're going to get into 6 degrees of separation. There's a guy that I had on the show several times, and he made the snow for the movie Fargo. He makes snow for movies and TV shows. He made the snow for Fargo. And listen to this. He told us this on his visit last time. In the wood chipper scene.
Yeah.
He's lying on the ground shaking the machine because they didn't get any action out of it the way they liked. So he lied down on the ground off camera and shook the wood chipper as Buscemi's getting ground up.
Correct.
Yeah. How about that?
I think in the separations, I think we know that person. I think he was at our shop 2 years ago for our Christmas party.
Oh, really?
Sprayed, he put snow all over.
Dieter Sturm. Dieter Sturm is his
Entirely
name.
possible. I'm in Hollywood. It doesn't snow a lot here, but it does at Christmas parties.
Okay.
And the other, and I hadn't seen your intro. I had, I was at a party at David Zucker's house on Saturday, who did your movie Airplane, which apparently you've seen.
Oh, yeah, another classic.
Another classic.
Oh,
I didn't
my
know
God.
you're so aviation related. This is a good thing, Gary.
Yes, indeed. And I'm a big fan of aviation. I think it's here to stay. And that's why I've labeled my show the Gare Force. And you see, well, let me tilt that up. There's Concorde right there. That's Concorde.
The big reveal.
Yeah, that's Concorde. And I had
you need a taller chair.
I do. I'll figure this out someday. We're only a year into the live shows. It takes a while. And I had the privilege of flying Concorde. And they don't say the Concorde. I found out it's Concorde 3 times. That's the closest I'll ever come to being an astronaut, because that was just kick ass, as you would know, a guy into aviation. Let me start with this. Have you flown Concorde? Did you fly it before it was retired?
I did not. I was probably in a window where I could have ridden it toward the end. But what I did do was I rented a fighter jet in Russia. So I flew a fighter jet over Russia, Mach 1.4, which I think is about the same that Concorde would cruise at.
Yeah, it really just screams across the ocean as you're on it. And okay. So let's get into your life. You started in the U.S. Air Force. This is where your interest in aviation started, or was it way beyond that when you were a kid or something?
When I was a kid, so I was born in South Central LA. We moved to Long Beach, and I had a neighbor that was a fighter jet pilot when I was 3. And he would put me on his motorcycle and drive me around and point things out. I remember there was an oil barrel, and he said, that barrel's full of oil. It's really heavy, but when we fly, we have to carry it. And so he started putting weights and balances and things like that in my head as a 3-year-old. And then because my father's Hungarian, so he escaped. I have 6 uncles there and a big family. So we would travel to Europe, and I'd spend my summers there. And so it was the biggest event was to get on an airliner. My mother was an American Airlines representative, so she worked for American. So we had some flights and things. So that went everything to me. And then as a kid, we moved to Ohio, and I'm like 5 or 6 years old. I spent all my time just cutting open cardboard boxes, and I would draw airports and I would draw airliners. And I wasn't into military aviation or any of that stuff. I loved the colors and the sense of community that came around airlines. And and then I just read books, anything I could about airplanes. So people today won't relate to it because there's a lot of data, but we had the Funk and Wagnall's encyclopedia, and there was 32 pages that was allocated to aviation, and I would read that. And I read books about inventors. That's all I did as a kid. And then ultimately I started when I was 12. I had a neighbor that was a balloon pilot, was one of only 5 or 6 in the U.S. that was full-time. So I started working with him every morning before I went to school. We'd go out, and so I was professionally basically making money, like a paper route's worth of money from the time I was 12. Air Force, but when I was 18, eventually I was flying transport jets there. And when I was 19, I started building a spacecraft with Bob Truax. I built hand-built this a first private manned rocket ship cabin, basically. It was designed to carry a person to space. It was called Private Project Enterprise. I'd heard about Bob also when I was 12. And so I was always the youngest guy doing what I was doing. When I was in the Air Force in my squadron, I was the youngest aviator in the squadron. And so that gave me the opportunity to meet a lot of mentors who had enormous amount of experience in it. And the funny thing about aviation is that you go back to the Montgolfier brothers way back into the 1700s. That was the balloon period. But from the time of the Wright brothers to now, it's very easy for a person my age to have met people that worked with the Wright brothers. Or Bob Truax worked with Robert Goddard, who is credited with inventing the rocket, the modern liquid fuel rocket. He interviewed von Braun to work in the U.S. when he took over. So I've been lucky to have these people in my lives. And so I don't know if I'm saying too much here, but bottom line is, as an inventor, my responsibility is to understand the state of the art. So it's a big value in knowing the history as a result. And then as an inventor, my responsibility of what I do is to create the future before the future gets to me. And that's the challenge, is you have to think far enough ahead that it's going to be relevant, and then you have to move physically fast enough that you can do something before everyone else has.
Desher, you mentioned Ohio, and there's a bit of a vortex there with the Wright brothers. That's where they were from. Where were you in Ohio?
Little town of Clyde, Fremont. I went to school at a little town called Green Springs. And yes, Rutherford B. Hayes's house was in Fremont. And I was actually I just drove through there 2 weeks ago. Strangely, I told you I drove out to New York. And yeah, so also there was an Edison. I think Edison was born there. So we saw his house, and we were close to the Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. So I made a couple trips up there, and when the Wright brothers shop is there now.
That's cool. Yeah. They replicated it. They took it apart in Dayton and brought it to the Ford Museum, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So two guys with bicycles, they spent, I think it was $15 on their glider the year before they flew the powered one. That one was $1,400 that they funded. Their engine mechanic is buried just up the road from me here in Burbank. And so it's really three guys. And if you understand what you're doing and you're willing to be, have the initiative, you can actually have an impact on the aviation industry, or a lot of them, honestly, if you're willing to think ahead of what the current state of the art is. And they did that. There was other people doing it, but they were able to craft it because they have their hand skills and things.
And you and I talked a few weeks ago about the Wright brothers. I had just finished a book about the Wright brothers, and you have read a number of books concerning them. And what I found really interesting, when they were testing the glider and then the flyer, there were so many naysayers. Of course, they're starting from square one. Nobody had flown before. Man going out of his element, that was completely outer space in people's heads. Outer space was beyond everything. And then them trying just to get into our space above ground was too weird for a lot of people. So they got a lot of blowback. They didn't have much funding at all. In fact, the government here was not in their camp. They had to go to Europe to get some warmth.
Right. Yeah. So they went to Paris. If they had each other to bounce off of, and you probably know more about them than I do. I haven't studied them heavily. I studied the art of invention, and they were one group of them. But I will say that they went to Paris, and when they came back, and they'd been flying there, they couldn't get any help. Just mowing the lawns, so they get the sickles out and they're just chopping the grass. And every time I do something like that, I just remind myself, like, yeah, this is the deal. And their singular plan was to sell items to the Army. They did want government support. They saw that as their customer. And it wasn't long from 1903 until World War I, and there were other players in the game by then. But there had been flights with gliders, and obviously there's just anomalies. There's times when a person could be holding on to a sail on a ship, and then the entire thing would lift them up. And you recognize that there's enormous energy in the air, and there's a capacity to lift a person, and you just start theorizing from there. So naysayers are, that's part of my deal is you just ignore these people until you do what you do, and then they all vaporize. So I'm sure that's how the two of them work together. They knew they were empirical in their data. They knew what their challenges were, and they just said, look, we can spend our time arguing with people, or we could just do this, and then we can wait around for them to decide if we did or not. It's entirely up to them. And that's the approach that you really have to take as an inventor, I think.
And I did read where when the airplane became weaponized, that completely crushed them. That was not what they envisioned when they invented the airplane, to have it used as a weapon of war.
That's a common thing with a lot of inventors.
Yeah.
And what happened was, initially the idea was reconnaissance. And even today, I won't get into it too far, but in that case, so when it did become a weapon, it started with World War I, and it was initially reconnaissance. And because aviators tend to have a shared experience, the pilots would look at each other and they would wave at each other, because they both knew, they all knew that it was them against the machine, against the world at that point. And then what happened was someone said, wait a minute, this is a war after all. And they would take up half bricks. And the idea was to get, to wave at the person and then get that half of a brick and, throw it through their wing and try to hit the motor. And then suddenly the other person was startled, saying, wait a minute, aren't we all pilots here? And now the air superiority and space superiority is the primary function of aircraft. And you have to be careful, how you navigate that, I should just say. Some people dive right into it and they're rich. And then there's weirdos like me who just said,
yeah,
what else can we do?
I always make this statement about aviation and how far it's come. We went from the Wright brothers to the moon in 66 years.
Yeah.
That is pretty amazing when you see what they started with. And that's why with the flying car, and I hear all this blowback, I'm reading about how people are looking at the flying car now in the same way they looked at the Wright brothers. Oh, come on, this is not going to happen. And I'm thinking the Wright brothers started from square one. You who are working on the flying car, you've got all this technology. So it seems like you're starting from square 10.
Right. It's the machines that we make are more complicated. So for instance, my partner that I built a gyrocycle, I call it. It's a flying motorcycle. We built it in 7 months in a bicycle shop. It was the same deal. It was two guys that were bike mechanics, Craig Calfee and myself. We built it on just one table. So from the time we started building with a drawing until we had it in the air, licensed, registered, smogged, insured, everything, it was 7 months. And it was easier than what they did in a way, because we knew due to previous flights that if we applied some technologies to it, that it would work. It just basically couldn't fail. So that's a massive plus. The other side of it was what we built was substantially more complicated, and it was just more work and took more skills and things than it was to actually build a plane. So if you look at their plane, it may look challenging, but the reality is it's a lot of the same thing. They made ribs that were identical. They put linen on it, which was identical. So you can demystify this stuff if you build things your whole life. But you're right. And actually, Steve Wozniak's book, it's pretty interesting, it states in there, it says, look, if you're an inventor, you really just have to fund the whole thing yourself. You gotta ignore everybody, because no one's going to help you. So just get on with it and then deal with it later. And you either are an inventor or you're not. And once you start going down the road of business, you might stop doing it and do something else. I don't know. It's a weird subject, but they did have they had a huge influence on the world as today for yourself. And it should make it easier for people like me. And obviously the technology is superfluous. It's everywhere. Let's
show some of the pictures and explain what we're looking at here, Dejer.
That is the gyrocycle, number one. I call that the GT. And so that's a handmade piece of steel and carbon fiber that was, I designed it so it could use, so the rule in aviation is airframes follow power plants, okay? So if you have an engine or something that will lift you, can power you through the air, because people are really not strong enough, barely strong enough. We've got a friend that flew the Gossamer Condor, and then there was later the Gossamer Albatross, big aircraft that was human powered, but it's very, very tough for a person to have the energy. So this uses an off-the-shelf motorcycle engine, of which there's hundreds of millions in the world today. And you can get one for, next to nothing, maybe free or a couple $100. So I designed this machine so you could take any motorcycle engine and either drive the rear wheel or drive a propeller that's in front of it. And that would power you down the road as fast as any sports bike you want to buy. And it would allow you to fly through the air without having to buy a separate engine or do anything complicated. And so Craig Calfee and I built this one by hand. And then we had it flying in 2005. And then it became a business kind of thing, and then it got shuttered and whatever. But the good news is that fortunately some folks at Smithsonian Air and Space Museum have recognized what we did, and so some photos of this are going into the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum next year. And this is me showing it at the Quail, which is a motorcycle show. It is a great street bike. And I get to keep the bike. I learned this. I built Craig Breedlove's land speed car, his last one. And one thing I learned from him, he donated his first car to the, actually in your town, I think the Chicago Museum had this first car, this Spirit of America in there. Somebody stole the engine out of it. Yeah. You couldn't access it. So for me, I want to be able to have the creative freedom to both use this machine in the future and alter it. So I'm happy to say that it's being, respected by the Smithsonian, but also I get to keep, futzing with it.
I saw the Breedlove car at the Museum of Science and Industry. Yeah. Hey, you mentioned Bob Truax earlier. Bob Truax designed the vehicle that Evel Knievel tried to go over the canyon with, right?
He built the engine for it. He helped design the Polaris missile. And then he was a Navy captain, and then using a steam rocket, he fabricated and managed the power plant for Evel Knievel's Sky Cycle. Yes, and then his son Scott Truax rebuilt another one in recent years. And there's a movie, actually, he just sent me, there's a trailer for it now called Stuntman, I think, where his friend took it, or did actually jump the Snake River Canyon. And so that's right. So Bob Truax did that, and then he started Private Enterprise, which is when I jumped in with him, which was post-Evel. But Evel funded the first private manned spacecraft. So what happened was after the Snake River Canyon jump, Evel said, well, look, what can we do now? And Bob said, look, I think I can make you the first private astronaut. And so Evel wrote him a check for $1,000, and that was the budget. And so when I got involved, I worked for 4 years or so for no money. And then we eventually cobbled some stuff together, and then we sold it to Naval Research Labs. And that was a guy named Pete Wilhelm bought it. And it was also someone in between named Fel Peters back in the late 70s who dropped $40,000 into it to become the first private astronaut that would sit in this cabin that I built, right? And this is when I was 19, 20. I was flying jets in the Air Force at that time, and then all my spare time I was building spaceship. But that was Bob, yeah. And he did do that thing with Evel. So Evel was really kind of the first person to actually fund it.
And Breedlove set the land speed record initially, right? What was four of them?
4 times, yeah.
What type of speed are we talking about here?
Craig was the first to go 400, 500, and 600 on the ground. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And so when I got involved with him, our ambition was 700 in the sound barrier. And that was, I think we started in 80 or 95 or something like that.
But he did not achieve that, right?
Correct. We were running, and that's a whole story I've never told. There's books written about it, but I haven't read them. Craig is he's a motor sports Hall of Famer, and he was very responsible for his own designs. He designed these things, really brilliant, and he had the nerve to drive them, and the challenges of underwriting them. So I'll just say this: there's a new car being built that's very similar to the one that we ran. And the British team managed to pull it together. Richard Noble ran that effort, and Andy Green drove it. And so I was there when they broke the sound barrier, and we did not. And then the car, I sold it to Steve Fawcett. The circle I run in is kind of small with people like that, and so Steve had just flown around the world with Richard Branson. Funded his.
That's the Balloonatic guy.
Branson, well, both of them.
Fawcett.
Yeah, Steve was the first to fly around the world solo in a balloon. But not just that. I mean, he did a lot. He did a lot. I mean, I think he has 60 records.
And then he ended up being eaten by bears, right, or something at the end? He crashed, and isn't that the end of his life, right?
I think that's correct. So what happened was, so I talked to Craig, and I asked him, I said, look, are you sincerely done in your heart with this car? Because the ambition was for him to run it, and he'd made a lot of efforts to get the car out to do another attempt. And I said, are you really done? He said, yeah. I said, okay, so here's what I want to do. I want to sell this car to Steve Fawcett and let him try. And so that's what we did. And then Steve brought someone in to make some alterations on it, sadly, and the car never ran again. The last time it ever ran was when I was with it in the desert. But Steve was planning to make an effort with that, and then he was in the A-list club of aviators, so he was up at Baron Hilton's house, is my understanding, up in Reno. And Baron is a true pilot, and he has a lot of airplanes for people to use. And I think he took one of his aircraft and was probably ridge soaring with it, and augured into a mountain in the Sierras. And then it was a big manhunt. And I was in Phoenix, I was in Texas at the time. And I had just finished building some gyrocycle stuff, and I was about to drive a motorcycle. I'd never ridden a motorcycle before. They scare the hell out of me. And I decided, okay, I'm going to ride it from Texas. It was my first ride. I'd never been on a bike. I rode from Texas to California. But right before I left, I got a call from a guy who said, hey, man, we can't find Steve. And I said, don't worry about it. I said, he's a little overweight, which is very good. That'll give him a chance to, he'll have food. He's smart. He knows he could absolutely survive anywhere. And I figured what would happen was he'd probably spend a little time, clear some brush, and then set the plane on fire so people could find him, right? And then started riding across the country. And I called. I said, hey, should I just deviate from LA? I'll just come up to Reno and help you guys search. And they said, dude, a lot of people are looking. Larry Page turned some, they turned some satellites around, and it was a big manhunt. And but after a few days, it started getting very concerning. And then I think someone found his aviation license probably a year or more later, and walked into a restaurant or bar with them and said, "Hey, I found this." And so the idea is the best. I guess the hypothesis is, yeah, he was probably eaten, or what was left of him, because his bones were scattered around. Sadly.
Yeah.
So his wife, she ended up with the car, and Peggy. And there was a time in there I thought I was going to reapproach her and say, "Look, can we have this car back?" Because the people that were working on it, working enormous amount of time, an enormous amount of years as a way to take the record for the United States. And now this car was sitting there. She put it on eBay and Auto Trader for, I think, $3 million. So I said, well, the challenge for me was there's a lot of stuff that goes with it. It's a 50-foot long car. There's trucks, trailers, spare engines. It's a whole infrastructure, right? I didn't have anywhere to put it. But the idea was say, hey, look, can we just do this and maybe we can revitalize this thing? But ultimately, I think the alterations they did to it, in Craig's opinion, were extreme and not to the benefit of the car. And now I haven't seen it, but it's in a museum. I think the Rocky Mountain Museum or something like that in Colorado somewhere. I haven't seen it, but it's now in a museum, and it's been altered from when we ran it.
Let's look at some more. Do we have more video or photos of Dejer's work? And what is this, Dejer?
This is a rendering of the new aircraft I'm developing. I call it Street Wing. This is what it will look like when it's flying. It's based on some very old tech, which is a stagger wing biplane. And I have one that's like this. I have it. It's developed by a guy. This model was by a guy named Burt Rutan, who developed most famously recently was Richard Branson's new spaceship. But anyway, so Burt has a long legacy of developing a lot of planes. This is one he did. This layout was based around a very low energy engine. It was an off-the-shelf kind of generator, $800 engine, right? That would put out 18 horsepower, and they were getting 120 mile an hour in the air flying off this motor. So I saw one in a museum, having already done the gyrocycle, and I was looking for something more efficient and simpler. And I thought, wow, these wings are so short. They're only 7 feet long. They're just like surfboards. So I got a little obsessed with the idea of making an electric version of this airplane that I could drive down the street, and then I would be able to store the wings either on this, as you see them here, nice and flat. It gives me 7 square meters of area to put solar panels on. And there's a race that's managed where people get to drive solar-powered cars. It's generally a collegiate level race. And they have the finals every year in Australia. They run from the north to the south. And it used to be with a layout like this with 3 wheels, they were getting up to 80 miles an hour with 5 square meters of solar panel. So with 7, I feel like they could do pretty well. And also now the race has been changed. Shell Oil sponsors it. And as so many things happen, they said, well, your cars should look more like normal cars instead of highly efficient things. They should be really wide and have lots of seats in them that you don't use. So the cars are getting slower and less relevant, but they're still the Danish team. I think they're basically getting 50 miles an hour out of 5 square meters. So with the machine you just saw, the next thing I'm going to do to test it, and what you saw there is the shape. It's a rendering, but we have the actual shape that we built, and that's how we would store the wings, to drive down the road. And I'll just be able to plug them in and out. They don't weigh more than a surfboard. They're 15 pounds, right? There's no reason to make complicated electronic or mechanical things and failure modes and expenses if you're kind of, as you stated, at the Wright brother level of things, So this machine has a very high probability of flying because planes exactly like that have been flying for 30 years. And then the probability that I can drive it down the street is 100% because I already have. So I'm looking at 200 miles an hour on the street and probably 250 in the air, and potentially no fuel required, certainly for the driving. And we'll find that out. I'm going to go run this in August across Death Valley, because that's the last thing in the world you would want to do. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. And I'm going to see how fast will this Street Wing go with just the sun. That's 2.3 horsepower is what we're calculating. Very streamlined. And then I want to see how much energy it's going to take to go 60 or something like that. And just be able to have some data points about the driving and start traveling with it. And this is just a plug. It's a shape. And so what we'll do is eventually we'll get around to pulling an exact duplicate mold off of that and then building a flying version of it. And it's actually, as you stated with the Wright brothers, the flying part was done 30 years ago. The driving part is where the challenge is. And a lot of that is simply managing and understanding the rules that allow me to navigate into making something street legal, which this already is. And
that has never flown. The Street Wing has not flown yet, right?
That hasn't flown, but many, many, many thousands of hours of Quickies and Quickie 2s and Dragonfly airplanes that it's based on have flown. Yeah,
let me ask you this, Desert. There are about a dozen well-funded companies in this flying car space, and some heavily funded companies have abandoned the whole thing. Google was supporting a group, and they stopped. And Uber was in this game, and they pulled out of it. And you're doing this basically on your own. How do you get your funding?
Well, you're going to send it to me, Gary.
That's how it works.
No, so I don't.
How do you live? What do you live on?
Wait, no, back it up. Larry Page, when he went public with Google, wanted there was a meeting there, and he basically turned to some people and said, I want a flying car. So if you've got $7 billion a day you go public, then what do you want? You want a flying car, right? Or any other thing you could want, but he wanted that. So he's funded several companies, right? One of them that you stated would be Flyer or Black Fly, etc. So what happened was these companies were the brainchild of a man with a lot of money to spend, and he underwrote the developments, to my understanding, and he hired people who are highly skilled, and they did great jobs manufacturing things, and then they determined that this was not a path to making money. This is not a business. And a person like Larry has enough money and a very successful business that you'd have to wonder, why do you need another successful business? And as you stated, there are other companies now who maybe didn't read that press release who are still pursuing it as a business. Great, good on them. These are vertical takeoff machines that uses, that's a prerequisite for some of these designs. They want to take off straight up so that they don't need airports, and they are designing specific airports for aircraft that don't need airports, right? And that's being built. There's companies like Lilium and others out of Germany, et cetera, et cetera. There's hundreds of these aircraft in development, right? And ultimately, it comes down to you have to ask, what's your ambition? What is your ambition for these machines? And in many cases, they will answer, we want to sell rides to people, okay? And we want to solve the traffic problem, okay? So the question is, if you want to sell rides to people, what you're saying is they have some money in their wallet, and you want to get the money from their wallet and transfer it to your wallet in exchange for a ride. And at the end of the day, you have some of their money, and you didn't go to jail for it, right? The reason I'm doing what I'm doing is because I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to go places, and I do not want to make a mess doing it. Is a vertical takeoff machine that flies a regularly scheduled route back and forth and back and forth and back and forth to be a business that creates a fund transfer? Is that something that I aspire to, or is that an ambition? No, it's not particularly compelling, right? So how I fund things is I do things that I perceive as the value that I would like to achieve if I had unlimited resources, okay? And I don't get tied up in what I don't have. I get tied up a little more in what I perceive as my ambition and how I will illustrate that. And I do that with whatever resources I have. I have fantastically talented people that, for me, that's the greatest buzz, is they bring help to me and they're involved. Like my friend Leon Warner, he shaped the Street Wing. He's brilliant. It's a 60th aircraft. He's never been there. He's never been to the Smithsonian to see all the planes he already has in there, but I'm going to take him there. And he worked with me on the Land Speed project. Craig Calfee, my partner for many years, he invented the carbon fiber bicycle. Effectively made it for the first one that was ever used in competition won the 1992 World Championship for Greg LeMond. And now 100% of the bicycles today, the Tour de France is taking place today. There's not a steel bicycle in the Tour de France. So what happens is you can't just sit around and say, well, you know what, our accounting department has determined this isn't really making sense, so we've decided to drop everything, even though it seems like it's compelling. Go back. If you have all of it, what is compelling? That's what we do, okay? Regardless of what it costs us.
But Desir, you still have to pay rent, and I know from what I read, you live in a shipping container at an airport, and
yeah, so did the Wright brothers. Yeah.
Okay, but still, you
should they have quit?
No, but do you have money? Did you come from money? Did somebody give you a lot of money? You have to have certain basic income, don't you, to do stuff?
I was born in South Central during the riots, and I have jobs.
So you do support yourself in other ways, is what I'm saying.
Well, I work, yeah.
Yeah. And what is that job that you do? I'm just kind of curious.
Most recently as an inventor, full-time inventor. I was working at Wet Design for the last 5 years. We made water fountains like the Bellagio and things like that.
Oh,
I did a TV show with them, and they said, hey, we'd love to have you here. I just signed another patent probably 2 or 3 weeks ago that was issued. So I make a living as an inventor, and sometimes I do projects like these, and sometimes they do really well. So like I invented a toy in my house in San Francisco some years ago. It cost me, I think, $2,000, and I sold it to Atari, and then I sold it to Mattel, and then I bought a house in North Beach, and then I moved to London. So the thing is, there's a trajectory here.
Yeah.
You know, Truax's rocket. Okay, so we slept on the floor. We built the rocket ship. We sold it to the Navy for $800,000, and then they gave us $7 million, and then they, you know, so.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just, because I'm fascinated by the whole Desir orbit. I mean, it's incredible. And I read where you invented, it's called the Mixman. I think that's what you're referring to, the Mixman DM2. What is that?
Yeah. Well, right after I did this sound barrier project with Breedlove, I came out of that with, I think Craig owed me $7,000 when we were done. Okay. So it was interesting. The team said, oh, Desir's got a special deal with this guy because, you know, he spends his own money. Like, he must have something. I was like, no, it's like, we're going to break the sound barrier. And it didn't matter that Craig couldn't pay me or couldn't buy stuff. I was buying equipment, whatever. So I came out of there negative $7,000, right? And so I moved back to San Francisco to a warehouse I had helped construct into a living space. And some musician friends of mine said, hey, you know, this guy that you knew, basically I knew from London, had moved, a guy named Will Henschel, had a computer company that he'd started. He was a musician, well-established songwriter. And he'd moved to San Francisco. And he introduced me to a guy there that had a software company. And it was, they said their problem was it was kind of too fun and it wasn't professional enough. And they wanted to try to find a way to make it more professional. I had been a musician prior to that. And I wanted to get back in the music world and away from rocket cars and rocketry and stuff like that. So when I saw it, I said, you know, this is, if you did this and it was a more professional fashion, I said, there are a few thousand people in the world that would want it. And they would all demand a free copy because they are such fantastically famous, wonderful musicians that you're going to have to give them one to get their endorsement. I said, on the other side of it, if you just made a game out of it, then you have millions of people that might want this. And so we took a completely separate approach to it. So what I did was personally funded and fashioned a machine. I spent $2,400 on it. I threw it in the back of a pickup truck and I took it down to Atari and I got them to agree to buy it. And then we did what we did. And then I drove to LA and I slept in a car for the night and I sold it to Mattel. And then Mattel ran with it and they fabricated it and brought it to market. And then I got hired as a music exec as a result. And I spent the next 5 years, or not 5, probably 3 years flying around making digital music deals with different artists and record labels, mostly New York, London, a little bit of Paris, but mostly New York and London and San Francisco. So these things all have a trajectory, you know, and they're all, everyone's an adventure. It's an expedition, I should say.
And your goal, Desir, is not to be an entrepreneur that mass markets flying cars to the public. You just want to do it really for your own enjoyment and get into a flying racing car circuit. Is that right?
The idea there is to not destroy the vision immediately by doing what everyone has, previously, which is, saying that we're going to monetize everything we do by finding the lowest common denominator of the most people who have never done this before or purchased it, and aim for them and hope to God they come in and bring their checkbooks and preserve us. That's what I'm not doing. What I am doing is I'm saying there is an installed base of flying cars in the world. Some of them are in people's garages or their hangars. Some of them are in museums, okay? So as long as they exist, then we can use them, right? And there's never been a flying car race where a mission, and I define flying cars as machines that can fly through the air and carry a person through the air, or drive down a road that are street legal vehicles. So automobiles are effectively designed in two worlds. They're either street legal or they're not, right? So a top fuel dragster is nice and fast. It would be an easy way to cross town, except it's completely illegal to drive one on the street. It is not street legal. And these are legacy definitions, right? The other side of the world, which is not the, the Formula One race car, is the street legal car, right? Has certain constraints. And so my ambition is to build a street legal aircraft, a flying car that I can travel with. And I will use that. And I have one, I've got a couple, I guess. I've got a motorcycle that already fills all the squares, and it's a gyrocycle. And there are other people who have them. And my ambition is to get these people together into a gallery effectively and just start racing them. And when you race, it means that you don't have the constraints of the consumer perception that, oh, you're a failure because 5,000 people didn't buy your stuff. The only good musician in the world is Justin Bieber because more people buy his stuff, right? So we should forget about Rachmaninoff and, Segovia and all these other people who sold less, right? So the only revenge is good art. So my ambition right now is to just continue to make these machines. And this is sort of the last chapter for me, because I really like the flying car world and I like the racing world. And racing is an excuse that you can do anything. So if I said, oh, I need a skateboard ramp in the shop, people go like, why? Well, we're racers, Oh, okay. Or I need cheerleaders, or I need another glass of whatever. Be like, oh, we're racers. Oh, okay. So once you're in the sports world, you can get away with a lot. There's sponsorships opportunities rather than just selling stuff. So I don't know if you know what, Gary, are you a Formula One fan by any chance?
I know of it. I mean, I couldn't have a long conversation with you about it.
I can't either because I don't know much about it, honestly. But I do know that a few years ago, take a guess. What's the average annual budget for a Formula One team? They have to build 2 cars and race them, from what little I know.
From what little I know, they're very expensive.
Pick a number.
A couple $1 million?
320 million euro per team.
What?
So when you're looking at $500 million per year going into an aerospace project, times 12 or 15 or 20, you're going to see a lot of development, right? No one's done that. So I think if that was brought to bear on the flying car world, you'd see an enormous amount of development. The other thing you're not looking at when you're racing is you're not saying, well, how am I going to get my grandmother, my 4 cats, 7 bags of groceries, and my kiddie pool in the back? You don't need that. The answer is, well, we're racing. We just need to put the driver in there, right? So drivers weigh, on average, 180 pounds. There are no 7,000-pound people, and there are no 12-pound, racers. So you build the machine is developed for a single person because that's precisely how many people you need to race an Indy car or a Formula One car or a bicycle. So now you're talking about 1-passenger vehicles. Guess what? The world has trillions of miles are being traveled in 5, 6, 7, 8-passenger vehicles, and there's one person sitting in there, right? Again, we were talking a little earlier, I think, before we went on air about the fashion of vehicles. People don't buy cars; they wear them, right? So they may or may not have a personality before they put themselves in their machine, and they're adopting a lot of that goes with it. And a lot of these machines are 50, 60, 70-year-old designs, right? They're not really applicable today because things are changing. So what I want to do with the Racing League is kind of provide some level of fashion to machines that are very, very efficient and very, very high performance, and initially will be very exclusive. And so my ambition, again, is to get other people to come and do this because that's what I love. I like to see this collaboration happening. And you're going to see a lot of rapid development in the flying car world as a result. The flying cars are not going to be coming from, Detroit. They're going to come from hand builders that work at places like the Experimental Aircraft Association has 200,000 members, okay? They're based not far from you. They're up in Wisconsin. And so these people are all over the world. We understand the rules of what it takes to build an airplane. And a lot of the airplanes that fly over your head are hand built, right? And so most of them don't drive. Now, all birds can walk, okay? All bugs that have wings fold their wings on their back. It's a matter of evolution. And having discussions about the validity or the viability with people about this, I don't have time for it. It's like you said, it's like take the complaints that you've read about and regurgitated and written about the day before you wrote something about cauliflower, whatever. Pretend that you know what you're doing. Fine, great. Stupid me, I fell off a turnip truck and I don't know what I'm doing wrong. There is an evolution for animals, and these animals all birds have retractable landing gear, right? They're all able to walk. They're all able to move on the ground. But the minute if an F-15 gets to the end of the runway, it's dead, right? So birds are all dinosaurs. They all survived the last extinction. Okay, there's a recent find in China, 180 million year old fossil of a bird, which is almost completely identical to the bird today. The only difference is like one of its claws was a little longer. I think it was, a little bit longer than the other. So you imagine how many years before that 180 million years that thing get from a, paramecium or whatever it was into this aviator, right? So we have another extinction scheduled, apparently, and being able to travel. I think mobility is nobility.
I believe it's in October. I read something about that. Yeah, we're heading to that. Hey, Dejer, let's visit again after you do some more experimenting and stuff. There's a lot to talk about here. You're the most interesting man in the world, or as you want to be referred to, El Mariachi of Aerospace.
There you go. Yeah, the $7,000 movie that left them all scratching their heads.
All right, Dejer, it was a pleasure. Thank you. I'll be in touch. All right, yes. All right. As he said before we started the show, Leslie, they're not making any new birds. I love that. They're not making any new birds.
There's always evolution. And with that, we're ready for it. Damn, are we ever ready for it?
Wow. That guy is unbelievable. And one of the things I read about these flying cars, one of the obstacles they're going to face is the government regulation of these. And you see a lot of complete idiots driving. Imagine if they could fly and what that would be like, although the sky is more vast than our roads.
Well, but compared to what we've seen in the last decade with all the drone technology, and almost immediately they realized, okay, we have to have some rules, but I kind of like the Wild West appeal of, like he said, with the racing community is,
right.
Let's get these things up here, and then we can start sorting all that out.
It's a hybrid. It's a flying car, and it's a street car. It's a hybrid. And that other point he made, how many times do you drive where you're the only person in the car?
Right.
80% of the time, 90%, right?
Right. And so I absolutely don't need 12 cylinders and a giant chunk of metal around me necessarily. Although if you're on the expressways these days, you kind of feel like you should have more metal around you. But there are ways around this. And what we don't need is bureaucracy hamstringing guys like him.
Right. Because once the government gets involved, then the whole thing bogs down. Again, our government didn't think the Wright brothers had anything going on either, and that's why they went to Europe. Okay, good vision there. Hey, I want to warn my affiliates or alert my affiliates. I should warn them down the road that we're going to run a little long today because we still have a lot to get to, and you have some stuff you want to report on. I've got to bring Ryan up here in a minute, but Ellen, what I want to do first is show the picture of John Doolin from Bettenhausen. His handsome kids. Look at that T-shirt, the Gare Force T-shirt on a boat. Look at that. Yeah, that's the Gare Force T-shirt in action right there. And John Doolin's handsome family there. Look at they're having a good. That's summer right there.
Okay, so we need to get one of those stickers like they have on NASCARs of the Gare Force logo and have Dejer put it on one of his vehicles.
There. Until I get to the water.
We can't afford the big sponsorship or anything like that, but it'd still be a bitchin' logo to have on there.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of sponsors.
Speaking of sponsors, here we go. Bettenhausen. right, Alan?
Adventure just got bigger at Bettenhausen Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Fiat, and Certified Megastore in Tinley Park and Orland Park. See the all-new 2021 Jeep Grand Cherokee L right now during the Make This the Summer event. Bettenhausen has the new Jeep Grand Cherokee in stock. Now, make it yours at BettenhausenCDJR.com.
John Doolan works with Mike Bettenhausen there, and this is an incredible group of people. I've known them for 20 years, and I'm just so happy to be friends, and they've been great sponsors. And I can't say enough about, if you want a car, new or used, there's where you go. No hassle, no haggle.
Oh, sorry. And if you happen to be in the Chicagoland area this weekend, there is a hybrid Chicago auto show going on right now. So you get a chance to go look at the Jeeps. They've got a great display out there. So maybe take one out for a ride and then go over and talk to those folks and make it your own.
That's right. All right. And Mr. Hochberg, he has a team that will help you with your mortgage refi and everything you need to know about credit scores and everything associated with getting a loan. And call them for the free consultation, because the market around the country is on fire. In fact, I read where Bettenhausen is in Tinley Park, as you saw there. I read where Tinley Park has 0 housing inventory. That's how fierce it is, right? 0. That I've never heard before.
People are paying over list price. It's crazy.
And if you don't have cash, you want something as good as that to be close to the top of in line to get someplace. David will tell you about the 21-day close. So call those numbers and get the free consultation. All right. And Leslie's got stuff. And then Ryan's going to talk about Wisconsin.
Well, we kind of teased this on the morning show. Well, first, wait, let's talk food first. Are you looking for a job and you love Mexican food? Mm-hmm. McCormick's is looking for a director of taco relations. The spice company this week launched a nationwide search to fill the coveted spot. The position will involve working with McCormick's branding team to develop new recipes using the company's popular taco seasoning, of course. And then you get to travel around the country to pitch those dishes to chefs and home cooks alike. And you don't even have to commit to some kind of lengthy contract. The position is only slated to last 4 months at $25,000 per month, i.e. $100,000 for a temporary gig.
Are you hard shell or soft shell?
I'm kind of a soft shell girl.
Yeah, I'm hard.
Well, and it depends.
Hey, now.
You know, and that's the thing. There's a place for every shell, and sometimes.
Yeah, I just like the crunch and the whole thing. I love tacos. You give me some good chicken tortilla soup and a hard shell taco. Wow.
$25,000 a month. Go ahead. Make your taco spiel. Yeah. And speaking of food, how about macaroni and cheese flavored ice cream? Stock of the collaboration between Kraft and ice cream maker Van Leeuwen's sold out almost immediately. And that's kind of exciting since it was $12 a pint. And that's not bad. Creamy, sweet, and cheesy is how it's described. Reviews have been mixed.
I've heard you describe like that. I don't like macaroni and cheese as macaroni and cheese. I'm not a fan. And as an ice cream flavor, no.
Wait, so you don't like macaroni and cheese as macaroni and cheese?
I don't. And I don't like French onion soup. There might be some correlation. I can't explain it. I don't dig it.
Okay, so even if they chop hot dogs or throw tuna in it, it's just not your deal.
No,
okay,
it's a mess. It's just a gooey mess.
Then stick with your hard tacos, mister.
I will.
A Filipino snake handler is dead after being bitten by a cobra while trying to kiss it. According to witnesses, Bernardo Alvarez, who claimed to be immune to snake venom, was cheered on by a crowd of locals as he picked a venomous northern Philippine cobra up off the ground and began showing it off to the onlookers. He then went one better and attempted to kiss it. The deadly snake latched onto his tongue, and moments later, Mr. Alvarez collapsed, and despite the efforts of medical personnel, he never regained consciousness.
Thumbs up to the snake.
Dude, Really?
And the one that was in Alan's air conditioning or heating unit or whatever he's got down there in Florida.
There you go. Golly. A family in Sardinia got quite a surprise when they went to investigate the sound of something crashing onto the roof of their home. Among the remains of one of their solar panels was a suitcase loaded with cocaine. They called police, who eventually identified the pilot of a small aircraft spotted in the area at the same time the suitcase landed. It seems the pilot's aim was a little off when he attempted to toss the parcel to some drug dealers waiting on the ground. That ground crew, however, remains at large.
What have I been saying? When does the duffel bag of cash, or the suitcase in this case, of cash fall on my house? I don't care about the I want the cash.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Nobody wants the coke. Well, some people do want the cocaine, but it's problematic.
Yeah, okay. I'd rather have the cash. All right. Is that it?
I have one more if you want.
What do you got?
A woman in Nevada is in trouble with the law for breaking into the office where she worked and moonlighting as a dentist. Laurel Ike worked at the practice in Washoe County, but she's not a licensed dentist. That didn't keep her, however, from availing herself of her employer's equipment to do some extractions when no one was around. According to police, between her fly-by-night dentistry and pocketing some of the cash and checks stolen from the office, she raked in something in the neighborhood of $23,000 before getting caught.
And the people that went to her, they couldn't get the appointment with the regular person, and she said, I'm available and I'm a dentist, and they didn't question that? Or
I can do something. I think one client alone had something like 12 extractions, which seems extreme. But you know, it's like those people who would go to someone's back porch for butt implants.
Yeah.
Maybe not the best route.
I mean, I can see where this could be confusing. She's in the office and they've been going to the office, but okay. Why do you want to do that?
9 o'clock at night.
Yeah. Why do you want to do that? I don't know. Okay. Well, Ryan, there are a lot of questions I can't answer, and I'm sure you'll bring up more because Wisconsin, crazy town.
And we're in Milwaukee Bucks fever right now. So the Bucks are...
Yeah, what's going on with that? I don't follow unless I have some skin in the game, meaning a team that I would be associated with somehow. And where are we in this NBA run here?
Again, don't follow a lot, but we're close. A couple more games, and if we pull it off, we'll have it. So
a couple more games. So who's? Give me some real numbers.
Two. I think there's two.
I like that. They got to win a couple more games. That's good enough.
2 out of.
Yeah.
I think it's a best of 3 coming up. Maybe again. I'm a very core Bucks fan.
Ryan, here's what you said. Fuck it. They got to win a couple games.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Whatever.
What do you got to? And my friend had told me to pass this along. She just had the firemen and the policemen over to her house cleaning her windows. So I spoke with her this afternoon, and she said, "Boy, did they come in with a big swoop." So she's got clean windows.
What? What'd they come in with?
A bunch of people big swooped in and with their sheets and cleaned her windows. So
if you missed the show a few weeks ago, Ryan and his lovely wife had not had their windows cleaned at their house since they bought the house 10 years ago. Never had them cleaned. So they found this service where firemen and policemen are
off duty and retired.
Off duty go and clean windows, and they clean the windows and they're spectacular. It's just a funny thought of firemen and policemen going, what can we do? I know a lot of firemen and policemen like rehab. They like to do that. And I've heard of that, but cleaning windows must be lucrative. And she just had her windows cleaned and she's happy.
She did. And it's not code for anything, you know?
Yeah.
Squeegee your windows, Missy.
There you go. There's thank you, Alan. There's the stats on the Bucks and the Suns. So thank you.
Yeah.
There it is.
Thank you for keeping me honest here.
Well, he was right. They got to win a couple more games.
3 games, yeah, right? I mean, yeah, it's close, right? There you go.
All right. You have a report, an official one.
I do, and then I got a few pictures that I think you'll like.
Ryan found, you know how much I'm loving the cannon, the water cannon. There are toys. See, I'm not as dumb as I look. There are toys featuring a water cannon, so it's a popular thing. All right. Well, you want to roll? I'm going to. What, Leslie?
No, I was just going to say one of our best stories of the week were the water cannons that were brought into protests in India.
Right.
And these are
because they can't get water.